Mhm. My wife was telling me a story. Her sister is a nurse, and her sister was in the hospital, and a Jehovah Witness came in, a woman, and she needed a blood transfusion, whatever was going on. And her husband, she was unconscious, whatever, I don't know what happened, it was an accident or whatever happened. But her husband wouldn't sign the document, and she ended up dying because she couldn't get the blood transfusion. Is that common?
Yeah, it's really common. It's really common, Michael. And it's something that it's a big part of, I guess, why I still um, do. I don't do as much of it as perhaps what I used to do. Um, it's part of the reason why I still do a lot of the speaking out that I do, because this is people's lives at stake. You know, if you have a choice to whether or not your child or your loved one has a blood transfusion or dies, you have two choices. You let them live, or you risk being disfellowshipped. You risk losing all of your family, and you risk the prospect in your own head of you being destroyed at Armageddon by this so-called God Jehovah that is going to kill you at Armageddon because you chose to give your child a blood transfusion as opposed to letting them die. Can we just let that sink in for a second? You know, sure, that's not what a loving God is going to do. They're gonna, is he gonna really just turn around and go, yeah, good Jehovah's Witness, well done for letting your child die? You know, come on, let's have some common sense here, shall we? And sadly, it's all too common now of Jehovah's Witnesses that have died because of this refusal for blood transfusions. And they even had the audacity, the Watchtower, to produce this really sickening Watchtower. And it's back in the 90s, this is, and it's all there for people to see. This isn't something that some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses made up. This is something that the Watchtower produced. And it boldly had a watchtower of all the children that had died through not having a blood transfusion. And they made them into these, I don't know, they basically just said, look at how wonderful they are for what it is that they've done and how Jehovah will remember them at Armageddon. But I want to expose something here, Michael, if you don't mind. And apologies that we're going off at a tangent a little bit, but it's something I'm very, very passionate about.
Mhm. You say whatever you want.
So um, they have their own handbook, Jehovah's Witnesses, and I don't know if you know this, but they have their own handbook, elders, and it is a book which is called Shepherd the Flock of God. That's what it's called, and it's a secret publication that you're only given when you're an elder. And in there is how to deal with certain situations. It's about the book's about this thick, all right, and it tells you everything from what to do if Jehovah's Witness, if you find that one of your members is watching boxing, for instance, it will tell you how to deal with them. And each thing will depend on the discipline that you give them. So, for instance, if you were listening to certain types of music, they'd have this discipline, this music, whatever it is. Now, if you had a blood transfusion, it was a public reproof or it was disfellowshipping, depending on how they felt about it. Generally, people get disfellowshipped. All right, that's what would happen if they had a blood transfusion. Now, in Bulgaria, back in the 90s, early 90s, in Bulgaria, they said, the government said, if you keep this as a practice, we will take away your charity status. That's what they said in Bulgaria. Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society in Bulgaria turned around and said, fine, we will remove this from our Shepherd the Flock of God book. In Bulgaria, you would not get disfellowshipped for having the blood transfusion. And I'm sorry. So in Bulgaria, you would let it happen, but in United Kingdom or Spain, wherever else, those laws would still be applied. But they just slipped it out of there without anybody noticing. So this is what's the sickening thing. Even the leaders of the organization, deep down, will bend these rules depending on certain situations. This is why now in Jehovah's Witnesses you are allowed blood fractions, which is essentially the same thing. I think if they were honest, deep down, they wish they'd have never introduced this doctrine in the first place. because it's got them so tied up in knots now with regards to legalities. But this is something that the Watchtower has had a history of doing. If you want to go all the way back, at one point they were completely anti-vax as well, and people died of smallpox. You know, back in the 40s, that's what would happen. They would die in their thousands because Rutherford said it's better for you to have smallpox than it is for you to have a vaccination. And they've done exactly the same thing again now with blood transfusions. Only now it's even worse because people are literally dying in their thousands and thousands. It probably is going to even be even more than that because of this doctrine that they have completely misconstrued. You know, from Scripture where it talks about abstaining from blood. It's such a twist on Bible verse. It shouldn't even be. It should just be completely eroded altogether. And yeah, this is like I say, this is part of the reason I do what I do, Michael, because this is a doctrine that we can do without because it is literally wasting people's lives.
That is incredible about the children, how they made them into martyrs just because
Yeah,
that is like really bizarre stuff.
yeah, it's sick. It's sickening. It's absolutely sickening. And the other thing as well is Michael is also back when that Watchtower was produced, you weren't allowed blood fractions. It wasn't a thing. You weren't allowed them. Now you are. How are you going to feel as a parent if
Hmm.
if they'd have said to one of these children, look, we can save you if you go onto a dialysis, for example. Now back then you wouldn't have been allowed a dialysis because it was still considered to contain fractions of blood. Now you are allowed this medical procedure. You're allowed to go on a dialysis because what happens is the blood leaves your body, it goes into a tube, it gets cleaned, and it goes back in again. That's what happens on a dialysis. Now, you are allowed this now as a Jehovah's Witness. They will call it a conscience matter. Back in the 90s, it wasn't a conscience matter. It's something that you would be disfellowshipped for. Now, what if one of your children could have had a kidney dialysis, if they could have gone on to one of these things and it saved their life, your child would still be around. But at that time, you didn't know that. Now it's okay, and your child will still be around. How are you going to feel as a parent if that happens?
Hmm.
And it's no different to any other doctrine that it just changes. And this is what is so hurtful and is something that has to be exposed with this religion. At any point, they can just say new light, new light, new light, and in the click of their fingers, a doctrine can change. And that's the problem. You know, God says in Malachi that my name is Jehovah. I am the same today as I am tomorrow. And yet, for some reason, this religion isn't. It changes depending on what suits.
Hmm. What is the Watchtower?
What is the Watchtower? The Watchtower is the organization. The Watchtower is the man-made religion that tells them what to do. It is everything. It is everything. Um, and if I could just explain a little bit, Michael, just to explain how important the Watchtower is for you viewers that perhaps aren't too familiar with this religion. Now, when we used to go and do the door knocking, you know, there's usually fairly standard responses from everybody. I'm not interested, you know, have my own religion, whatever else. And I remember going once on to Saturday morning. I was knocked on this guy's door, and I gave my usual opening. I said, "Hi, everybody. My name's Jason," and I was say, "Hello. Today we're offering people a free home Bible study." Now I didn't realize at the time, but I had knocked on the door of somebody who'd actually gone to Bible college and was a very devout Anglican who knew the doctrine of the Jehovah's Witnesses, wasn't ever a witness, but he said, "Okay, yeah, I'll have a Bible study with you." So instantly, I brought out a book, and the book was called "What Does the Bible Really Teach?" And he said, "Well, hold on a second. Why do we need a book that says what does the Bible really teach? Why do we not just read the Bible?" And I was like, "Because that's not how we do it. We teach the Bible from the publications that the Watchtower produces." And he said, "No." He said, "If we're going to have a Bible study, then let's just read the Bible." Anyway, I didn't know what to do with this. I had no idea what to do with this. And I took back somebody that had been an elder in the congregation for best part of 40 years. This guy had been an elder for. If somebody could help this guy understand, it was this guy. It was this elder. So I said, would you come and help me on this call? And he went, yeah. So we went back and we were reading a passage from Romans. And the whole passage in Romans talks about, and now we understand it without the spectacles of Watchtower. I understand what this Bible verse is talking about, and it's talking about salvation through grace. That's what the Bible chapter is talking about. Anyway, we proceeded to read just one chapter out of Romans, and it just went like that. I had no idea what this chapter meant, and I turned to this elder to just go, what does this mean? And he just looked back at me, and he didn't know what it meant either. Without the aids of the publications of the Watchtower, we didn't understand what the scriptures really said. And this guy that was talking to us, that was a devout Anglican, he knew what these Bible verses were saying. It was there in black and white, but we needed to refer to our own literature to understand what the scripture says. And that is the fundamental problem with the Watchtower, is that when you are a Jehovah's Witness, it is follow our rules. If they change, then you change as well. If we introduce a new doctrine, you follow it. If we introduce a different version of the Bible, which they've done it many times over the years, if we remove certain parts of scripture, then that is what you have to do as well. So the Watchtower is everything. The Watchtower is the whole thing that makes up all their publications and is what tells them what to do.
Is there a head? Is there like one guy that's the head of everything, or is it is there one main leader, or do you have numerous heads throughout?
So there is a governing body, is what they call it. So the governing body is made up by, I think it's 12 at the moment, all men. So 12 men that are in Brooklyn, in America, and they are the ones that essentially decide what gets said in the Watchtowers. There will be others that are influencers, but it's usually those 12 that get to the final say.
What about Jason, the door knocking? What did that entail? Did you have to do an hour a week? Did you have to do 2 hours? Like, how long did you go door knocking? Was there a certain amount of doors you had to knock on? How did that work?
I mean, so basically, there's levels as a Jehovah's Witness. When you become a publisher, and that's what they call it, a publisher, you commit to doing a certain amount of field ministry. They don't give you a target to hit or anything like that, but you are expected to maintain a certain level. Okay. Now, you also have the option then to become, after you're baptized, you have the option then to become a pioneer, which is what I did. Now, when you become a pioneer, you had to, back then, I think the hours have changed now, I think they've dropped a little bit, but back then you had to commit to doing at least 50 hours of ministry every month. And you had a report card, and on it would be how many hours you've done, how many Watchtower and Awake you've given away, how many books you've given away, how many Bible studies have you started and have you attended, and how many return visits have you done? So yeah, you had a little report card, and at the end of the year, they would give you like a final report card on what you'd done.
And you were supposed to maintain a job as well as this?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So most of the men in the congregation, they would be self-employed to allow them to do, extra work. There wasn't that many, at least in my congregation. My dad actually being an exception, to be fair. He did actually have a proper full-time job. Most of them would have self-employed jobs to allow themselves to be able to do, a little bit more work on the ministry.